Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and we're back again with another Spirit Island video. Today, we are taking a look at Lure of the Deep Wilderness. Lure is a very powerful spirit who is capable of being played in many different ways. There's no single definitive way to play this spirit, which can be both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because if you really enjoy playing Lure, then there's a lot of different playstyles and a lot of different approaches that you can use in order to win the game, but it can be a curse if you're a beginner and you're trying to navigate this spirit for the first time because there's no single best thing to do. There's no pure, perfect, predefined plan for you to follow. And so the very, very large decision tree will make it harder to get into the spirit, but will make them much, much more replayable and more fun once you do learn how to play them. So first things first, we got to take a look at what the components are. When you're playing Lure, what do you have to work with? And let's start with the special rules. So we have two special rules. First, we have Home of the Island's Heart. Your presence may only be added or moved to lands that are inland. Okay, this is purely a negative. This is a big restriction. And in fact, this is going to be the single biggest weakness that is going to define so much of this spirit. The inability to add presence to coastal lands is going to be the single biggest problem that we're going to spend so much of the guide talking about how to overcome. A couple quick rules things related to this. There is one major card that will allow us to put our presence into the coast. That is Indomitable Claim. It explicitly says that you can ignore presence restrictions for that proliferation as a part of Indom. If we're playing with Breath of Darkness down your spine, there does create an additional loss condition where if Breath has only coastal presence, has nothing in the inland, and he tries to escape our presence, we will lose the game because of an illegal game state. However, that's more of a problem for them than it is for us, so let's not lose too much sweat over it. There are a couple ways that an inland land can become coastal, such as from Weave, where it could be an inland land and a coastal land become joined together. And another way is if the deeps aspect for ocean destroys a coastal land, and then therefore the ocean moves up, and this inland land becomes coastal by nature of being next to the ocean. Those are not additional loss conditions. That's just kind of a funny thing that happens. Okay, looking at our second special rule, enthrall the foreign explorers. For each of your presence in a land, up to 2 explorers do not participate in Ravage. This is our only defensive component of our whole spirit. We have no defensive cards and special rules, things like that. The only way that we can defend a land is with this here. Now, there are some very important rules implications, particularly when it comes to Russia and Habsburg mining expedition, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Just understand that for now, it is functionally a defend too, but in only specific situations. It only defends against explorers, and this is our only form of defense in our entire kit. Next, let's take a look at our innate powers. We got 2 of them. First, our left innate is called Forsake Society to Chase After Dreams. Slow, range 1, must target a land with invaders, and we can replace either an explorer, a town, or a city with 1, 2, or 3 explorers. Why would we want to replace an explorer with an explorer? Well, after this power replaces pieces with explorers, and you could replace an explorer with an explorer, you gather any number of those explorers into your lands. So you could take an explorer, turn it into an explorer, and then just gather it into one of your lands. Perhaps we want to use this to deny a build or some other things. It's a kind of a very funny line of text, but that's why it would be there. Then it says, if target land has any buildings remaining, create a fear. And this is a very tricky thing to use. Maybe we're going to have several different powers to interact with the land, and if we just sequence them correctly, we can pick up that fear. But very often, we might have an explorer and a town and a land, and it's about to ravage, so naturally we want to get rid of the town. So we wind up just, transforming the town into explorers, gathering explorers out of the land, and then just not collecting that fear. It's a very common play pattern, but, if our goal is to maximize fear, recognize that certain sequencing and certain ways that we make our decisions could be relevant. If we have 4 air, we do get to repeat this power, which is a very nice, very important threshold for us to hit. Because this whole innate, no matter how many elements you have before the repeat, only takes care of one single invader. And so with so many innates, as you get more and more elements that get stronger, this kind of doesn't. It's just, transform one single invader, gather pieces into your land, produce 1 fear, no matter how much there is. Okay, our right innate is called Never Heard From Again. It is a slow power, range 0. This one has an inland targeting restriction. Okay, and we have some elements out of order. We always resolve our innate powers from top to bottom. Okay, and so that's where this little, normally you'd see innate powers with increasing costs and elements as you go down, and you would assume that they would get stronger as they have more elements. But as we'll see here, the ordering does matter, because this first tier will add a Badlands, and then this second tier will destroy explorers if there are Badlands among other tokens in the land. So we could imagine if these were flipped, such that the order was by the amount of plant elements, then we could use this power, or we would miss out on the instant value from the Badlands. The way it's written, we could have explorers and no tokens in a land, add the Badlands, then immediately utilize the Badlands to get rid of some explorers. Next here is to do 2 damage. So this is another way that this Badlands can be utilized. We could use the Badlands plus 2 damage, maybe kill a city, all kinds of other uses. And then at 6 plants, we get to repeat this power. Now, I've played a ton of games of Lure, and I can honestly tell you I have never once in my life hit the 6 plant repeat. And if we want to do it solo, we'd have to hit 5 card plays and hit this here, basically removing all of our presence off the tracks. Or maybe we'd have to do 5 card plays plus our growth for a plant. It's a lot of hoops for us to jump through. And it's very strong, of course, if we can get there. However, I've simply never done it. For the majority of the game, we're just going to be using it to destroy explorers. And the benefit of destroying explorers is that it will actually be a source of fear. As we were talking about on the left side, on this left innate, sometimes we're getting rid of buildings, but we're not getting the fear that we normally would. Normally, when you destroy a town, you get 1 fear, but like I said, that oftentimes doesn't happen. When you destroy a city, you get 2 fear, but you might get 0 fear, or if you do get fear, you'll only get 1 fear, right? So we're getting less fear than you normally would if we were just destroying buildings through our left innate. Well, explorers don't naturally produce fear, but we do with our right innate, so it kind of balances themselves out. These 2 innate powers work together in very nice harmony. We transform buildings into explorers, bring them into our lands, and then get rid of the explorers. So bring them in, flush them out. I really think this is thematic, and I really think it's fun. And for your first time playing the Spirit, this is a great core to your play pattern that you can lean on. It is very strong, and it is very effective. Now, it's important to read the fine print here. If we destroy any amount of explorers, we get 1 fear. But if we destroy 5 or more, we get 2 fear. So if we are capable of destroying 2, 3, or 4 explorers, there's no marginal value to those extra explorer kills. We can destroy up to 2 explorers per token. We can choose to get rid of less. So a very common thing that I like to do is only kill off 1 explorer at a time, bit by bit by bit, and then finally, when I have 5 or more, kill 5 at a time in order to maximize my fear generation. The only time I'm ever going to get rid of exactly 2, 3, or 4 explorers is if it's necessary for an upcoming ravage. But remember, our presence disables explorers from participating in ravage. So we don't need to freak out if we can add a presence to the land, or maybe we already have 2 presence in the land disabling 4 explorers. We can really slow roll this right innate and produce plenty of fear. So I just referenced it a second ago. Let's take a look at our presence tracks. We have fantastic presence tracks. Technically, every single presence that we add increases our power. There is no single dead spot on all of our spots. However, there is one single node that is functionally dead, and that is this animal node here. Why do I say that? Well, do we need animal to hit our innates? Like, technically yes, but functionally no, right? This very expensive tier, right? The third most expensive tier on both of our innate happens to require a single animal element. Now, in order to hit these, we're going to be playing a bunch of cards. And if we're playing a bunch of cards, the odds of an animal element just showing up along the way is honestly pretty likely. And if you take a look at our starting hand, we start with 2 animal elements that have lots of other great elements. Right? This is a primary moon, primary plant. Well, take a look. We got moon, plant, plus an animal. So it doesn't matter which way we're going. If we're playing Perils of the Deepest Island, that animal's going to show up anyways. Swallow doesn't have a moon, but it does have that plant. So once again, if we are pushing for this right innate, it's just going to show up for free anyway. So this is our one and only dead spot on our tracks. Every single other presence placement gives us a substantial increase in power. Now, there is something to balance it out, right? It's not completely free, and that is because of our growth options. So we are a pick 2 spirit, but it's kind of a restricted pick 2. With other pick 2 spirits, we can basically say one of the picks is just always add a presence, and then our other choice is usually some combination of like reclaim, gain a card, gain energy. However, this is a little bit different. We have a left pair and a right pair. So we pick one of the left and one of the right. Therefore, this means that we cannot both add a presence and reclaim in the same turn. We cannot gain energy and gain a power card in the same turn, right? We're going to be, usually adding presence plus one of these 2 as often as we can. Then, of course, the occasional reclaim plus one of these 2. So we would define Lure as a 0, 1, 1 spirit. Technically, there are 4 different growth options, and so you could call them a 0, 0, 1, 1. However, colloquially, I think everyone just refers to this first one as your reclaim option, right? If you're reclaiming, doesn't matter which of these you're going to get. You're getting 0 presence. Then you can either add a presence and gain energy. Okay, that's this middle one. And then add a presence, gain a power card. That would be this right one. So as a shorthand, if you've played other spirits like Shadows, that is another 0-1-1 spirit. You might be familiar with how frustrating it can be trying to get lots of presence onto the board. Okay. Now, as I mentioned before, our one and only source of defense is adding presence. So this creates a little bit of tension. Okay. If we cannot add a presence on reclaim, and we're starting to run out of cards, but we do need to add a presence in order to defend a land, what do? Right? We can get ourselves stuck or force ourselves into these really weak turns. So that is a little trap that we can fall into. Just got to see it coming and plan accordingly. Our add a presence option has a range of 4, which makes it basically the longest range growth in the game. Obviously Finder can add a presence to any land anywhere, so that's always going to win, but otherwise 4 is the biggest in the game. I believe Volcano also has a 4, but that's it. Everyone else is going to have less. So we can really spread across the island really, really fast, and we can provide lots of support to assist with other spirits pretty much anywhere. As we're going to see, we actually have no restrictions as far as sacred sites go. None of our unique power cards require sacred sites. Our innates don't require sacred sites. And so we can take a look at a big spread of lands and find a whole bunch of key points which will allow us to maximize our effectiveness. Even adding one single presence to another person's board, we have these range 1 powers, so we have this big sphere of influence. We can be incredibly effective. There's not much to talk about with it, but it is very interesting how we gain our choice of a free element here when we go to gain energy. This can be really helpful for hitting our innates from time to time. It can also be really helpful if we're trying to go for a major and we need more of these specific elements. So it's got a lot of flexibility. It can be very useful, and it's just a really nice thing to have. Now, taking a look at these presence tracks, there's a really, really nice symmetry to this spirit. For both of these max innates, we get a repeat if we just have a ton of that element. And then if we take a look at the columns of our presence tracks, it all just I don't know, it's just really nice, right? 1, 2, element, 3, 4, 5, and a reclaim. It is just nice and clean, and it is just very satisfying to look at, honestly. But what this does mean from a more strategic perspective is because we are so balanced, going top track and bottom track is both equally viable. It's not like if we go one way or the other, there's like a massive delta in potential value. No, instead, if we just commit to the track, we're going to be gaining incremental amount of strength pretty smoothly either way. Let's take a look at our unique powers. We have 4 of them. Starting first with Softly Beckon Ever Inward. Paying 2 energy, it provides a moon and an air. Range 0 targets an inland land at slow speed. And it will, in the target land, gather 2 explorers, 2 towns, 2 beasts, and 2 Dahan. Each of these is gather up to 2, so we could choose to do less if we wanted to. But this provides a ton of value for Lure. I will go ahead and say that this is our best unique power of all of them. One of the things I mentioned right at the start is that the big weakness that we have to overcome as Lure is our inability to put presence into the coast. And this power right here is one of our only tools to work on the coast. This will allow us to gather towns out of coastal lands. In fact, this all of our cards can only target inland lands, right? Gift of the Untamed Wilds targets a spirit, but if we're playing solo, right, we target ourselves, we can only add our presence inland. So these are functionally all only inland. This only targets an inland. Presence can only be added inland. So the defense, because of presence, is only inland. The only powers that can do anything to interact with the coast, okay, is this Left Innate, targeting land with invaders, and then functionally Softly Beckon as a way of gathering towns out of the coastal lands. This is one of those cards that we're going to be playing regularly just to handle that big weakness. If we can keep denying coastal towns, then that means that we can also prevent coastal cities, which is dramatically harder for us to deal with. But even outside the context of solving the coast, it's just a really good card in general. Oftentimes, you know, we just play this, like pretty much every single time that we play this, we will get amazing value out of it. On pretty much every single board, you can get specific lands that you'll set up to solve multiple lands with this Softly Beckon. One of the important concepts is that we want to have the invaders in a fewer quantity of lands, even if there are more invaders in those lands. And so having a card that can just gather invaders from 4 different lands all with one action is simply incredible value. We don't have any defense inherently in our kit, but if we did draft a defend card, this also brings in Dahan. So, you know, you could also imagine a line of play where a land's going to be ravaging, but it's not hitting for that much. And maybe we have like a Nature's Resilience that defends for 6. It might actually behoove us to bring invaders into the land just so that way we could also bring in Dahan, drop a defense, and let the counterattack clear everything out. Lots of great, interesting options to Softly Beckon. It's one of those cards you're never going to go through a reclaim cycle without playing. So, yeah, never forget this card. It's great against every adversary in every situation. It's our only real control power too. So, yeah, it's just useful from beginning to end for the whole game. The unfortunate thing is that it does cost 2 energy, and that will put some pressure on us, particularly if we're going for a bottom track strategy. It can be hard to pay for this, but, you know, we find a way because it's worth it. All right, coming now to these others. We have 2 cards that add tokens, and then 1 card that utilizes tokens. So we got Perils of the Deepest Island. Paying 1, we get a moon, plant, and animal. Range 0, targets inland at slow speed. It will produce a fear in a Badlands, and then also will add a beast within 1 range. That could be also in the target land, but it could also be 1 range away. Then in addition, we get to push up to 2 Dahan. We're not required to push Dahan, but we can if we want to. So once again, if we do happen to draft any kind of a defend card, we now have another way of manipulating Dahan. We have another card that can add tokens, and that is Gift of the Untamed Wild. Slow speed costs 0, can target any spirit, including ourselves, and it produces pretty much all of our elements: moon, fire, air, and plant. So this will add a wilds to target spirit's land, or they can transform one of their presence into a disease in that land. So for 0 energy, we get to add a token. Not an insane amount of value. However, a 0 cost 4 element card isn't something that we're going to throw away for no reason. It can be really helpful for thresholding majors, hitting our innates, and just kind of filling the gaps whenever we're just playing a whole suite of cards. A thing to note, we don't need sacred sites for any reason, but we start with a sacred site just as a part of our starting setup. So we can actually take one of these starting presents and just throw it away for a disease with this Gift of the Untamed Wilds, which is just a nice little cool thing to do. In some matchups, the Wilds is very, very ineffective, and in those situations, the disease happens to be much more effective. So we will find ways to get value out of Gift of the Untamed Wild over the course of a game. Now, as I mentioned, we have these things that add tokens, and we are going to use them primarily for Swallowed by the Wilderness. And this is going to do 1 damage per token in the land. It's going to be fast, 0 range, costs 1, must target an inland land, and it produces 4 different elements. In addition to the damage, we also get 2 fear. So a very common play pattern that's going to happen is use Perils of the Deepest Island to add a bad land and a beast into a land, and then Swallowed by the Wilderness will be used in that land. There are 2 tokens that'll do 2 damage, and then the Badlands will also add an additional damage. So now for 1 energy, we're getting 3 fast damage, which allows us to kill a town. Towns can be pretty sticky in the early game, but having this nice little 2-card combo allows us to handle it. And of course, tokens are going to stick around. These tokens in particular will stick around the whole game. There's nothing that inherently removes them. And so we'll be able to gain incremental value over and over and over again over the course of the game. The tokens that are produced by Gift of the Untamed Wild will be consumed, but, Gift of the Wild being a free card, it's we can constantly be throwing them out there, and it's not going to be too expensive for us. The only thing it really costs us is a card play. So if we're going for a bottom track option, we just want to play a ton of cards, and we don't want to spend a lot of energy, then Gift just becomes one of those aces for us, right? We're just going to be really happy to play this all the time. For top track options, unless if we get like a really expensive major that's really putting pressure on us, we might find ourselves playing Gift less, but that's okay. We also have Perils, provides tons of fantastic value. So that covers our starting components. Let's talk about board selection. Let's remember that our special rule says that we cannot add presence into coastal lands. And if you're paying attention, you'll notice that every single one of our starting cards is range 0. One of our innates is range 0, and our defense from our presence is obviously range 0. We technically only have 1 single power of all of our starting powers that is operating at range 1. And since we can't add presence to the coast, this makes us extremely weak in coastal lands. And so that is what I want to think about when it comes to my board selection. And there are 3 boards in particular that have a nice advantage in this space. That is going to be boards A, B, and E. Okay? What makes these so good? Well, these are the 3 boards where if you have a presence in a single land, you are able to be within range 1 of all of the coastal lands. And this is important because now we can start to think about cards like Softly Beckon Ever Inward. Okay, if we just drop a presence into each board's 4, 4, and 5, this Softly Beckon can solve multiple coastal lands simultaneously. With all of these other boards, we need 2 presence in order to be adjacent to all of the coastal lands. And that just makes us that much more inefficient because, let's just say that like on board C, if we had, Jungles Mountains as a stage 3 card come up, well, there's no way for us to do everything all with 1 action. Something's got to give. Okay, or a more common thing, right? Board D, right? Just the wetlands. This could be a stage 1 thing. We can't solve everything with just one card. We're going to be forced to spend several actions to handle this weakness. Now in solo, this might not be as big of a deal because you just add a presence turn 1, add a presence turn 2, and now you're good. But if you're starting to think about multiplayer and trying to see how can we maximize the value that we can provide to the entire team, well, now we're really going to want to be more efficient with our presence. As a 0/1/1 spirit, it is just that much harder for us to add presence to the board, and so each individual presence placement is that much more valuable. I will say that, it is nice if we are on A, B, and E, but even if a teammate is on A, B, and E, these lands in particular are just really nice and effective. I mean, this land here, E5, has the 3 coastal adjacencies, but it also has 2 inland adjacencies, making it just like a really, really high value land. We also have this really high value spot with land number 7, also has 5 adjacencies. Even having 4 adjacencies, it literally picks up half a board. And I mean, how much more support can your teammate ask for besides literally taking half their board within your range? Board selection is definitely one of those things that I don't put too much weight on. So the only thing that I'm really thinking about, regardless of which board we're on, is how to get that coastal adjacency. No matter what situation you're playing in, what adversary you're against, what invaders come up, your biggest priority in the early game is to just plant some presence in this middle layer so that way you can be more effective. Since we don't require sacred sites, when you're playing solo, you're probably just gonna add presence to 4, 5, 6 in your first 3 turns of the game, and then you're set anyways, so you really don't need to sweat it. The only time you really gotta invest much time thinking is in these multiplayer settings where you're trying to put your presence into as many boards as possible to maximize that value. Next, let's talk about the cards that we would like to draft. So we have a massive weakness with Lure that we've been talking about a lot, and that is the fact that we are only going to be inland. We cannot be on the coast. Our left innate is the only power that can target the coast, and then we have 1 unique card that can at least gather cards out of the coast. But outside of those 2 powers, we have no way whatsoever of interacting with the coast. Therefore, that is going to be one of our biggest priorities when it comes to drafting, is figuring out how to shore up this weakness. Second to that, we definitely want to draft cards that are going to give us the elements that we need for our innates. Both of our innates are good at getting plastic off the board. And so if we lean into them, that'll give us just lots of free excess value, and that's a pretty solid way for us to gain advantages as well. So the elements that we're going to want to prioritize is going to be moon, plant, and air in order to hit all of these different thresholds. The animal and the fire are literally just one-offs, really easy to get them kind of by accident, so really not something that we have to prioritize. With that being said, I've broken up our cards into a couple different categories. Instead of thinking of it like a tier list, just kind of categorical ways of thinking about what we want to draft. So first we're going to start with these middle 3 categories. Collectively, these are all cards that can interact with the coast. And on this lower right section, these are all cards that can interact with the coast that both have either a moon or a plant. So our 2 most important elements, and interacts with the territories that we are the weakest. These are all really, really strong cards to go for. So some examples that we have here, we have something like, Disorienting Landscape or Lure of the Unknown. These kinds of cards can get an explorer out of a coastal land, whether by pushing or gathering. And then with Lure of the Unknown, we could even gather a town out of a coastal land. Both of these kinds of things operate fast. Some other effects in a similar ways, like Call the Dahan Waves. If we manage to get a Dahan into the coastal land, it helps us deal with a single invader. Twilight Fog brings madness. We can strife off an invader. Maybe we have like Explore Town ravaging in the coast. So we have a suite of different ways of interacting with the coastal lands. This group of 13 here will also interact with the coast, but all of these lack both moon and plant. Some of them do still have air, right? That third most important element, such as Scour the Land. However, missing out on those two most important elements does knock these down a slight peg. I just want to draw attention to the fact that I think they are still very good, very useful cards that I'm happy to draft in the right situation. However, it's not like the absolute elite. Now, this upper category is defend cards. Oftentimes, we're not going to have enough damage in order to just kill things off of the coast, and sometimes we just need to kick our can down the road and play some defend cards. In fact, one of my favorite ways to play Lur, in terms of using his defense, is to use our powers to get all of our Dahan into the coastal lands. Ideally, you want to get 2, 2, and 2, since every board starts off with 6 Dahan. It's not a super difficult thing to make happen eventually. And then any defend cards that we draft will gain tons of value by getting that Dahan counterattack, and we don't need to look for more damage. I broke these up into 2 categories. These upper 12 all have either a moon, plant, or air, and then these lower 2 lack all 3 of those elements. So I guess the point that I really want to make here is that if we're going into drafting for defense anyways, we're also simultaneously going to be picking up some of our most important elements. Yes, I did mention a second ago that that moon and that plant is going to take priority, but that really only knocks out these 3 cards. All the rest of them have moon and plant. It's just a really convenient elemental overlap. Cards like Nature's Resilience do require us to have a sacred site in order to use them, and this is once again a tiny little benefit of boards A, B, and E, because we can just drop a sacred site, make ourselves adjacent to all 3 of the coastal lands with that sacred site, and then a card like Nature's Resilience just becomes that much more simple and reliable to use. I also want to draw attention to Carapace Land, since it is a range 0 card, but we do have, with one of our unique power cards, we can actually add a beast into coastal lands directly, and that makes this Carapace Land become a range 1 defend card. So with pretty much all the other spirits, it would be very challenging in order to have a ton of control over where Carapace Land can target, but specifically for Lur, it is actually very, very simple for us. We can drop beasts into the coastal lands pretty freely. So combining these 3 categories, the ones that are going to solve our coastal problems to varying degrees of effectiveness and elemental efficiency, this adds up to 53 cards out of the 100 card minor power deck. This means that every single time that we draft a minor, on average, we're going to have 2 fantastic options available to us. Now, this doesn't mean that the other 47 cards aren't useful as well. It's just that all of these are the ones that we're going to want to lean on in order to interact with the coast. But let's take a look at some of those other 47. Over here, these 10 cards up top are all support cards that can give more resources and strength to other spirits. We are very good at, neutralizing and buying ourselves a lot of time by just gathering a lot of invaders, picking off a lot of invaders in key lands, and we have 5 card plays if we go completely across the bottom track. This really frees us up to be able to provide a lot of support to other spirits. We don't need all 5 of those cards in order to deal with our problems, and so we are very free to play a lot of these cards. The only support card that does not give us one of our 3 most important elements is Gift of Constancy, which is arguably the single best minor power in the entire deck. So, it's one of those things we're more than willing to take that little sacrifice in elemental efficiency in order to play the best card. Really, we're happy with all of these things. Now, just because we are an inland spirit and we already have all our presence there and we're very strong there, doesn't mean that it's a complete free roll on the inlands. So these 15 cards are all range 0 cards, and they're effects that we're not going to be able to use in the coast, but we might still choose to draft them in order to shore up any weaknesses or any problems that exist on the inland lands. They are all varying degrees of effectiveness. I've drafted all of them at some point, and I found uses for them all. So after considering all of those cards, that really only leaves us these cards here that I really don't care to draft. These 21 cards are primarily consumed with things just like bulk fear, where we have a steady stream of fear with both of our innates. We're got a nice trickle over the course of the whole game, so just flat fear doesn't give us something that we need. And then things like blight removal Blight removal, it's nice and it's very useful in many matchups, but it's definitely not a priority for me to draft. The third type of card that's in here is Dahan Movement. We have two unique power cards that already gather and push Dahan, and playing those two cards, we generally do a pretty fine job of being able to get the Dahan into the lands that we care about. So pure Dahan movement cards like Call to Migration or this Promises of Protection, they don't really give us something that we need, and they are largely off element as well, so I just don't see any value in playing them. But this is only 21 cards out of the whole minor power deck, so that means that it's quite likely that of the 4 cards that you're offered, none of them even come from this bad pool of options. The variety of cards that Lure can make use of in order to find success is very wide and very diverse. And so our hit rate on drafts is incredibly high. I think drafting as much as we possibly can is possibly the best way to play this spirit. Doing the exact same exercise with majors, on the left I have majors that I'm really never happy to take. The middle, I've got majors that I'm kind of so-so on, and then the right are majors that I'm very happy to take. And you'll notice this distribution is once again very, very heavily in Lure's favor, with 42 of the 78 different majors available falling into this top category. There is such an insanely high hit rate. Every time that you pull a major, you're probably looking at 2 cards that you are very happy to take, which means that we have a little bit of flexibility. There are so many majors that are very contextual, right? They might be terrain restricted. You have to target a land that has blight in it already. It's only effective on the coast, so on and so forth. You have to jump through hoops in order to get lots of damage out of them. And so the fact that there are so many that are going to be viable if the conditions are right means that we have our wealth of choices available to us. I pulled a few of these out above the pile, and these are cards that I directly referenced in my Major Powers video that I did a couple weeks ago, where all of these ones, if we have taken our presence off of our tracks and we pick up our free elements here, the moon, plant, air, and animal, if we play this major and one other of our unique power cards, combine those 2 cards with the elements we get off our tracks, and we get to threshold these cards. When we're going for a top track major power build, we really don't want to push out to 3 card plays earlier than we have to. And so knowing that we have, 13 different majors that we can threshold off of just 2 card plays, no assistance from other spirits, anything like that, is just a really nice thing to be aware of. A lot of these major powers require setup with tokens, but we're the tokens guy. I mean, something like an Angry Bears falls really far down a lot of people's tier lists because, if you don't directly interact with beasts, you don't manipulate them, when you need to use Angry Bears in a specific land and the thing just isn't there, what are you going to do? Well, we produce beasts, and we have a lot of control where those beasts are going to go because we add them within 1 range of our presence. And so it's really easy for us to set up this Angry Bears. It's very, very reliable for us. And we could take that kind of logic with so many of these other token-based cards. Just want to draw attention to why a lot of these cards are falling in there. Some other ones like Accelerated Rot. If we have 2 coastal lands that are jungles or wetlands, Accelerated Rot boosts really high up in value. If we only have 1, then it drops a lot in value. The card isn't extremely efficient, so much as it is damage in lands that need to receive damage. Then a very similar logic, Walls of Rock and Thorn, right? It's a really nice, strong defend card, but if we're not using this in a coastal land where we don't have better options available to us, the value falls off a little bit, right? We can kind of rinse and repeat that idea with everything we've got going on, and the moral of the story is that because there are so many effective cards available to us, drafting majors is also an incredibly reliable way to get the job done. All right, let's talk about opening builds. As I was kind of alluding to in that previous segment, we have a ton of hits on our drafts. There are so many good cards for us to draft into. I just like hitting that button as much as I possibly can, and quite frankly, I think it's the best way to play this spirit. So as we talk about these builds, I know that there's 4 different growth options, but I'm going to say that anything that has to do with a reclaim is going to be growth 1. And then if we do presence plus an energy, that's going to be growth 2. And then growth 3 will get us a power card. As much as possible, I like to take this growth 3 option, gain as many powered cards as I can, and add as much presence as possible. Like I said, we have tons of fantastic cards in the deck. In fact, we have to draft in order to deal with that notorious coast. And then every single time that we add a presence, we gain marginal value. We have no true dead spots on all our tracks. So it really behooves us to keep growing as much as we can and keep ramping up in power. 5 energy, 5 card plays is a fantastic top end to be at. Now taking a look at our opening cards, Swallowed by the Wilderness is really just not playable on turn 1. We have a beast that's not even always starting in the coast, and then we have another beast that starts with a presence in land number 8. That's it. It's really hard to get damage out of this card, so we don't even want to consider it for turn 1. Instead, we have 2 different openings that we can do. We can do the Softly Beckon Ever Inward opening, or the Perils Gift opening. Both of these are good, they just work a little bit differently from each other. Let's start with a Softly Beckon Ever Inward. Okay, if we want to play this card on turn 1, well, first off, why would we want to do it? Simply put, it's our best card, and it gives us the biggest, fastest advantage possible. By gathering 2 towns, we're probably going to be using this in order to ice out our first 2 ravages. Okay, if we have, 2 different lands that are Explore Town, with that initial Explore, then by gathering in those 2 towns, we can then not worry about taking blight on that first turn. And then in addition to that, by gathering in 2 Explorers, we can deny 1 or maybe even 2 lands from building on the next turn. And any amount of lands that we can deny building, we can start to gain that tempo, and we can start to gain amazing advantages. There's 8 different adversaries with different setups, 8 different boards, and 4 different lands that it can explore during setup. So that's like 250 some odd different ways that we can have a turn 1 happen. I'm not going to be too prescriptive, but recognize that if we can get tons of value from Softly Beckon by denying blight and getting ahead of the subsequent turns, explore, builds, ravage cycle, this is a fantastic card. It's going to come up way more often than you would think initially. Now, when we play this, we have 2 different ways that we could go. Right, we could go top track. This is great if we're looking at going into majors for the course of the game. We might as well just get that extra income coming in early. And if we do this, we can afford to play a power card. Even if we're going to be going for majors, it's not a bad idea to go for a minor on turn 1, just because if it's a whiff or if it's one of those types of cards that you use it once, probably not going to use it again. Or maybe you're against England and you realize that Gift of the Untamed Wild isn't very good. You might want to play it before you forget it for a major. Lots of different reasons that you'd want to gain a card on turn 1. But recognize that this means that we are not going to hit our innates. So we are going to be giving ourselves more long-term resources with this extra power gain, but we're going to miss out on a little bit of short-term strength. Well, the other thing that we could do is then get that short-term strength, and we can go for the extra energy and an element, with that element being a moon. With this moon, that lets us hit our left innate, allowing us to transform a town into explorers. We could choose to take this route if maybe, I think it's board A, where your jungles are completely opposite corners of each other, and your Softly Beckon wouldn't be able to pick up both jungles. But you could use Softly Beckon to pick up one of the jungles, and then deny explorers, and then use our innate in order to pick up that other town to deny that blight as well. Another situation where this kind of opening could be really good would be if we're against Prussia, right? Where they go into 4 lands on turn 1. So you can't get all of them with Softly Beckon. You can pick up 2 of the towns here and a town here. So then that leaves only 1 land left ravaging going into that next turn. So let's talk out how these different openings with Softly Beckon could play out. Okay, so first one is if we go for top track and we gain a card. Okay, so we're going to be playing Softly Beckon on turn 1 and gaining a card here. We're going to gain 2 energy, pay 2 energy. We'll end the turn at 0. Okay, great. Well, on our next turn, we could then turn this into a bottom track strategy, and we can keep on gaining cards and adding presence. And as I'm going to demonstrate, we will have enough energy to pay for everything. all minor powers cost either 0 or 1, and our hand is full of cards that cost either 0 or 1. So even if we took the expensive draft every single turn with this 2 energy here, you'll see that it's actually going to work out. So maybe we draft again. Okay, we go up to 5 cards in hand, and we can play 2 cards. Gain 2, and let's just say this costs 2 energy. Perfectly fine. Okay, now turn 3. We're going to draft a card. We'll grow across the bottom. We'll gain 2 energy. We can play 2 cards. Okay, maybe this costs us 2 energy once again. Perfectly fine, right? We'll go down to 0 energy one more time. Okay, and then on turn 4, we'll grow bottom. We draft a card, and since one of our starting cards costs 0, even if both of these were to cost 1 energy, well, we gain 2, we pay 2, we can still pay for everything, and we are in a very happy place. Now we go to Reclaim. We go to Reclaim on turn 5, and we're going to be 2 energy here plus 1, so we're going to get 3 energy for the turn with 3 card plays. From there, we have tons of options. If any one of these cards that we drafted turned out to be no good, or maybe the context in which it's useful has gone past and it's no longer useful again, we could choose to gain a major power card. By following this build, opening top track and drafting every single turn, on Reclaim we'll have 8 cards in hand. So from here, we just kind of can do whatever the heck we want. We could then transition into a major and go top track. We could use this plus energy button to help us get the energy to afford that major faster. Can also help threshold it. We could actually just keep going bottom track, right? So on 3 cards, we Reclaim, and we could even draft another card, play 3. Then once again, we can draft a card and play 4. And then draft a card, get a Reclaim 1, and play 5. Now, in order to do this, we're definitely going to need to be drafting a lot of zeros. We might want to get a little extra energy from like an event or from a teammate, but recognize, at least as far as the quantity of cards in hand goes, if we go for this growth pattern and we hit the gain a power card every single turn of the game, we can actually go through the whole game and never underplay once. Really, really cool stuff. And like I said, at any point, you can always switch out to a major and then hit this energy button in order to help us afford it if we have to do that too. But, generally, if you're hitting 5 card plays, you're probably maxing out your innates, and you're just going to be really, really strong in general. This is, a big end game state. Very good, reliable thing to go for. So all of that was kind of like the slow roll build where you keep on gaining cards and you just kind of play whatever the heck over the top. It's a little bit of a casino effect. If you prefer to reclaim a little bit faster and do that whole thing 1 turn faster, what you could do is do Softly Beckon, grow bottom track, energy plus a moon in order to afford this, and then play no other card. Okay, we do this. And then we can hit our left innate, so it gives us a lot of activity on turn 1. Then this is going to leave us with 1 leftover energy. From here, now we can start to hit this gain a power card button again for the next 2 turns. Okay, so on turn 2, we'll come here, we'll gain a card, and then we'll play 2 cards. We had 1 leftover energy, so then we will, in this situation, we'll gain an energy, spend an energy, go down to 1. And then on turn 3, we'll once again gain a card, hit 3 card plays, and play this all. Now, the key thing to note here is that if we take this, we're going to have, and we take this plus 2 energy on turn 1, we're going to have a grand total of 5 energy over the course of the first 3 turns. And our opening hand costs 4. Which means that one of these 2 cards that we draft has to cost 0. And it would also be really nice if they both cost 0, makes our reclaim and all that stuff better. But one of these has to cost 0, or else we will not be able to fully maximize the 3 card plays. And at that point, you're probably better off just going here. Because if you can't afford 3 card plays now, when you reclaim, probably not going to get any better, and you might find yourself energy starved for a really long time. Being energy starved is kind of frustrating, right? But recognize that all of this is happening an entire turn faster than the previous build, and our turn 1 is a lot better. So by taking this path, it's a much more aggressive line. With the previous build, we're kind of slow rolling. We're trying to build up a lot of value over time. Here, we're trying to be a lot more aggressive and hit the invaders in the mouth right up front. So different people have different playstyles. Both of them are viable. Both of them will get you 2 wins. Maybe it's just how you're feeling that day. Okay, so those were openers with Softly Beckon. Let's take a look at our other basic opener, and that would be with Perils plus Gift. So if we do Perils Gift, we have to, of course, go bottom track in order to pay for them. But that's okay, because these collectively cost 1, and so we can afford it. The benefit of playing both of these cards, we hit all of our innate, so this gives us a lot of activity on turn 1. We get to add 3 tokens with these 2 cards, transform a town, and we even get to eliminate some explorers. It's kind of cool how these add tokens in the slow phase, so we might wind up in a situation where an explorer just rolls into one of our lands. The second card of the game just happens to match one of our starting presence, or maybe even that first growth, and we can maybe just like drop a wild and immediately eliminate that explorer, and then that solves it the turn. And that solves the stage 1 card. The wild will solve the stage 2 card, and all of a sudden that land is just completely solved until you get into stage 3, and it really shrinks down the game. Perils of the Deepest Island, you can choose to add that beast in the same land as the Badlands, and that will allow you to do a really nice Swallowed by the Wilderness on turn 2. Every single board has a town starting on an inland land, and depending on the adversary you're playing, you might have additional plastic in the inland land as well. But let's just start with the generic situation. Okay, let's just say that your normal starting town is also the land that gets its first explore. This is the type of situation where going for a Perils Gift opening is really strong. Start with a town, comes up with an explorer, and then it builds a city. Well, this is basically the deadliest thing that can happen on turn 1. It's one of the most dangerous situations. Well, we fight it back pretty easily. Perils of the Deepest Island will drop a Badlands and a Beast, and then we hit our left innate. That's going to eliminate this town, produce a fear. This wild, I don't know, it can go somewhere, use the right innate, right? Just get some amount of value, probably picking up whatever explored next. Well, the point is that on turn 2, we play Swallowed by the Wilderness. Okay, we have 2 tokens plus the Badlands, so that's a total of 3 damage, which is enough to kill this city. All that's left is a single explorer. We got a beast in there, might just die to the event, but we're also going to have a presence in this land, and that's just going to disable the explorer in case if we get increasing aggression or anything. It's a completely solved land in what is normally the most painful turn 1 situation. So with this Perils Gift opener, it only costs 1 energy, so we don't even have to go for bonus energy. And in fact, going for bonus energy can get us a Badlands. It really doesn't get us much value at all. So frankly, I think it's better just to go for a power card anyways. This allows us to see what's going on and make sure that we're making all the best choices. Okay, then on turn 2, right, let's just assume that we're trying to deal with one of these situations. So we're committed to playing this Swallowed by the Wilderness. Well, that's going to consume our 1 energy that we're going to normally produce, and we have a couple options available to us. We could choose to gain a card, and we might grow top track, depending on what the card is, but we might also choose to go for bonus energy, and maybe we want to pick up a moon, and we could pair this with a Softly Beckon. Okay, the 2 energy here pays for the Softly Beckon, so we could still go bottom track if we wanted to. However, in this situation, I'd be more likely just to go top track, simply because the animal spot is quite weak. There's no way we're getting value from 3 card plays. We're going to be at max 2. And then going for 2 card plays plus a moon makes it very likely for us to be able to hit our innate on turn 3. But at the very least, we can do this on turn 2. Swallowed by the Wilderness completes the setup that was done here by Perils. And then Softly Beckon is just an amazing card. We can use it to gather in tons of invaders. But an even cooler thing that we can do is we can use Softly Beckon to gather invaders into the land that we had just cleared was swallowed by the wilderness. Why do we want to do this? Because we already have tokens in the land, so we're already going to be really, really strong. And in the future, we're just going to be able to use another Swallowed by the Wilderness. Hopefully we get more tokens by then, but a kind of cool play pattern we can develop is using Softly Beckon to bring everything into a big token land and then knocking it all dead with Swallowed by the Wilderness. Then, like I said, from here, if assuming that we go for the top track, we'll have one floating energy. We can then gain a card going top track. If either one of these has a moon, either one of these has an air, we will be able to still hit an innate and get some business done. Then going into turn 4, we can just do a reclaim. So we'll be on 6 cards with 2 card plays. From here, we can kind of do whatever the heck we want, right? We could go into a major power build because we're already at the cusp of picking up that bonus energy and elements. We could convert into a minor power build and just, have that much more reliable access to our left innate. Really, it comes down to what we drafted, how the game played out, a lot of different details. It's hard to prescribe exactly what you're supposed to do, but recognize we have a lot of really nice setups available to us. So let's think about our team for a second. What kind of spirits does Lure pair really well with? Well, I guess the first question we can ask is, what kind of stuff does Lure offer to others? And the answer is nothing. This is our only support card, right? We have Gift of the Untamed Wild, which is a single range 0 wild or disease, right? Very, very small potatoes. And quite frankly, because we use tokens for other purposes besides like what the token literally does, this is most often self-targeted. I mean, from time to time, a teammate's going to have a presence in a completely empty land and wilds is just going to be really nice there. But in general, it's nothing to really write home about. It's not too exciting. It's not that important. So therefore, really, we got to ask, what do we want? What is important to us? And one of the things that we're definitely going to want is energy. Okay, if we can go for a complete bottom track and only ever gain cards, never have to gain energy, and we can just completely rush down bottom like so in order to get to our maximum card plays as quickly as possible, that gets us to a really, really strong state as quickly as possible. On the other hand, if we wanted to go for the top track, pushing, we would want to get a little bit of extra drafts here and there just to make sure that we can keep our hand full. If we're always drafting cards and we are on 2 card plays, we're going to be net losing 1 card every turn. And so that means that we're going to run out of cards right about here. But if we can get just 1 additional draft or 1 additional free card, okay, then we still get to play 2 cards here. And then once we hit the reclaim 1 and a power card, we're set. So just 1 single bonus power gain will allow us to never have to underplay our entire way towards maxing out top track while still playing 2 cards every turn. But outside of those generic resource type of things, I mean, obviously any spirit does better when you give it more resources. The type of support that we'd really appreciate the most is anyone who can do a little bit of redrawing of territory with us. Very often, people will just take their starting board and they're like, this is my territory, this is what I'm responsible for, and you're responsible for your board, I'm responsible for my board, and that's it. Well, since we are so weak in 3 of our lands, we could still, make an even trade and say that we're going to be responsible for half the island, 8 different lands, but maybe we just draw the borders a little bit differently. Maybe we are taking like these 5 of our lands, and then we pick up something like these 3, and then if we're teamed up with a spirit that can just jump their presence over here to our coast, and they can take actions here, and we take care of everything else. So of course we have a range 4 growth, so we could go like 1, 2, 3, 4, and get all the way out here, and then pick up stuff out this way. However you choose to break it up, if we can just alleviate ourselves from being responsible for our own coast, that is a great form of support, because now we kind of just don't have a weakness. Our only major weakness gets completely picked up by another spirit, and we can just free roll through the game. So there's so many spirits that fit the bill, but basically any spirit that can stretch their presence out far, right? We're not looking at like short range growths. I guess we could look at Vital Strength of the Earth as a spirit. That would be a very sad pair, at least if you're trying to make that kind of a trade. But, other than that, pretty much all spirits are able to get out, make that kind of trade, chop up the responsibilities a little bit differently, and everyone can act more efficiently. All right, we're going to head into our last segment of the video. If you are still here, I am proud of you. This has been a lot, but I hope it's been valuable. We're going to be talking about adversary matchups. Now, if you want to see me play Lure against any of these adversaries, I have a video up for a solo game against all 8 of them. Take a look in the description of this video. I have a link to all of these games. They've been uploaded incrementally over the course of the past few years. And so you can see examples of what I'm talking about. But instead of talking about each of them individually, I've kind of broken these guys up into 4 categories. And the first category, we have HME and Russia. This is incredibly strong matchups for us. Both of these are pretty free, but there is some very important rules to pay attention to. So let's talk about that over here. As you can see here in land number 5, I have 3 explorers and a presence. And both HME and Russia really care about having 3 explorers in a single land, but the rules are a little bit different. And of course, the way that they interact with Lure's presence is also a little bit different. So let's talk rules. For Russia, okay, in Russia 3, it says Ravage cards also match lands with 3 or more explorers. Okay, so it doesn't matter what card is in the Ravage slot. As long as any card is in the Ravage slot, if there are 3 explorers in the land, it too shall ravage. So let's just say like the sands are ravaging, the jungles are ravaging, it doesn't really matter. Land number 5 will also ravage. If the wetlands is the card there, then nothing changes. This ravages just like it would anyways. Now here's the important rules implication. The special rule for Lure says that 2 explorers do not participate in ravage. And the way that Russia 3 technically works is you need to have 3 explorers that are not only in the land, but also participating in ravage for this land to actually ravage. So if we have this set up here, these 2 guys are no longer involved in the ravage. The way the game sees it, there's only 1 explorer in this land. Therefore, it does not ravage unless it's specifically wetlands was the card, right? If it was sands, mountains, jungles, then this land would not ravage. Okay, so let's distinguish that from HME. HME, rule number 1, says that lands with 3 or more invaders are mining lands. And in mining lands, we have the disease and its modifier skipping, ravages instead of build. But importantly, during the build step, build cards cause ravage actions instead of build actions. So this is only going to trigger when wetlands is exactly in the build slot. And in that specific situation, this land will not build, instead it will ravage. Okay, now 2 explorers will once again not participate in ravage, but there are still 3 invaders in the land, so it still ravages, okay? It's just that it's only a single explorer that ravages, so it hits for 1 damage, which is insufficient to add a blight. If there was disease in this land, it would skip the ravage all the same, okay? It's going to be a ravage action no matter what. It's just that we're basically getting a defend 2 against HME. It's still insanely powerful, right? Because we're denying build actions from happening. We're denying ravages from happening. We're just reducing the amount of plastic that's on the board. And you can see in that video, it's just completely free, clean control from beginning to end by intentionally building up stacks of 3 explorers and forcing more ravages. But the rules are a little bit different. At the end of the day, though, HME and Russia are both completely countered by simply growing and adding presence. It doesn't require any actions from us to gain insane advantages against both of these adversaries. So therefore, playing cards and just doing things gets us ahead of the invaders. The existence of our presence neutralizes them, doing literally anything helps us win. And so these two are easily our best matchups, completely crushing them simply with the powers of growing. It's actually kind of funny. Sometimes I'll just grow and not play cards just because growing solves all my problems, and I might just grow and draft cards a couple turns just to build up until I can have a nice crushing force afterwards. All right, this next tier is the Prussia, France, Sweden tier. This is what I call the fragile tier. All three of these adversaries roll over and die to tokens. Okay, if we have a wild token and empty land, it will deny the explore, which denies the build, denies the ravage. It gets rid of the entire chain of actions. If we have a disease in a land and an explore comes in, well, then we deny the buildings and there's nothing to ravage. It's once we get ahead of these guys, we just lay down tokens and we snowball to a clean and easy victory. The only thing we have to do is just make sure we don't get crushed in the early game. But, like we said in our opening section, we have two fantastic different opening lines depending on the exact details of your board and your opening explore. Both of these openings will give you plenty of choices. There are little nuances and details with them. So Prussia, because the game happens so fast, this is a matchup where I'm very happy to draft cards like Reign of Blood that just produce bulk fear, just making sure that we can actually win the game before we run out of time. Generally, we're not concerned about losing to Blight or, actually because of the plastic on the board. We're going to be losing because we might have full control. We just don't have the fear to end the game. France, we just want to make sure that we're not getting too greedy with our Explorer stacks. Because our ability to destroy mass amount of Explorers comes in the slow phase, if we're dirtling and kicking the can down the road too much, we can just kind of accidentally lose by having a stack of 5 or 6 Explorers all transform into towns and just lose on the spot. Sweden is pretty straightforward, right? As long as you survive that early game, smooth sailing. They really have no resilience, no way of coming back, and they don't apply a lot of pressure on us. This next tier is only for Habsburg, HLC. It's a very weird adversary. They don't act in any similar way to other adversaries, and it's definitely one that takes a lot of brain and a lot of thinking because there is no clear defined path to victory. If this tier is all about just adding presence and winning, this tier is just getting to lay down wilds and diseases, and as we'll get to, these guys are all about majors. Habsburg has a lot of little decisions. Habsburg is one of those adversaries where since we get to control their actions, we can just use our knowledge of how to manipulate HLC against itself in order to gain advantages. A thing that sucks for every other spirit besides Lur is this durable lands. But since we are not destroying towns, we're simply transforming them into explorers, we completely ignore the bonus health. However, they put out so many towns that picking off one town here, one town there with our left innate is not nearly enough in order to handle it. Even though Habsburg 1 will gather towns into empty lands and still have them ravage, it is still worthwhile to pick off those individual explorers and deny builds just to make sure that we don't get overwhelmed by too much plastic. A very common deadly thing with HLC is that even a single explorer can add blight to the board because of the bonus 2 damage from adjacent towns. And this is once again where growing is really, really important. We just drop our presence into that land with that single explorer, we prevent it from ravaging, and then we are able to protect ourselves in that way. One of the nice things with HLC is that general strategy is to just do nothing on turn 1. And that's great for us since we're a slow spirit. We have basically no fast powers. We would love to just get a free turn to set up all of our different slow powers and gain control of the game from turn 2 onwards and simply concede that first ravage. It's generally the optimal strategy, just the way the escalation works, and it works right into the way that Lur wants to work as well. So it's just a lot of little decisions. Habsburg is just a very touchy, detailed adversary, and we're a very touchy, detailed spirit, so the matchup gets really, really complex. It's really fun, but at the same time, there's just so many little decisions. There's no single prescribed way of playing this matchup. Last, we have the majors tier, like I alluded to earlier. We have Scotland and England. Scotland is by far our worst matchup. Where Scotland is strongest is the coast, where we are weakest is the coast, so just try and avoid this matchup if you can. However, I'm not scared of a challenge. I have no problem playing Lur into Scotland, recognizing it's going to be a major uphill battle. For both of these guys, I like to take majors. England has the bonus build, so you have 2 buildings added from the bonus build, 2 buildings added from the regular build. We're adding 4 buildings a turn. That is faster that we're adding buildings than Lur is naturally able to remove. And so that means we have to go into majors in order to deal with it. Yes, once again with our left innate, we can ignore this bonus health, but we have damage from other sources that just become dramatically less efficient, makes it a lot harder for us to kill things that England provides. Majors is the way to go. With Scotland, we're also kind of adding 4 buildings a turn. We're getting buildings off explorers, we're getting a regular build step, and then we're also getting buildings off of Scotland 6. So depending on how you want to average that out, we're getting about 4 buildings a turn, outpacing what we can naturally remove. And so I think majors, especially to deal with the coast, is really, really important. So I'm pretty much always going for top track builds against these 2 guys. So there we have it. That is my guide for Lur. Lur is a fascinating spirit. So many decisions to be made over the course of every game. You have tons of different ways of opening. You have tons of different ways of approaching the game. We can go top track, bottom track, mix builds. We have so many different avenues towards victory. Makes this guy really, really, really fun to play. I hope that this guide can help you get your first games of Lur out of the way, and that will encourage you to play this spirit so much more. I think mastering Lur will help you with so many other spirits because he has so many restrictions that it forces you to think a little bit more creatively. You can't just free roll into every single game. If you have other tips and tricks for Lur that I didn't cover, please leave them in the comments. Once again, if you want to watch some gameplay, I have all of that in the description of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you all have a glorious day.